Let's now turn to Yuval Weber. He's a research assistant professor at Texas A&M's Bush School of Government and Public Service here in Washington. Yuval, I think it's important we go back to what Vladimir Putin here is trying to really accomplish.
So sure. So the political objective of this at its basic form is that Russia or President Putin will not allow Ukraine to choose its own independent alliances or alliance partners. Specifically, and he said this the other day very, very directly, that countries are allowed to choose their own institutions, their own alliances, but they cannot violate the principle of indivisible security. And for President Putin, he went on to explain that Ukraine trying to join the European Union, trying to join NATO, in effect, exercising its right to choose its partners was violating Russia's security. And by violating Russia's security, that's his explanation for why this is an emergency and why he ordered the Russian military to cross into Ukraine from several different areas.
Germany's foreign minister today said we woke up to a different world. Are we now, in fact, living in a different world?
So sure, we now understand in terms of that sort of sentiment is that in particular, a lot of leaders across the world, and especially in Europe, were thinking this is not rational for Putin to do this because this is going to ruin Russia's ability to advance as a modern economy. It'll isolate it from all of its partners. It will make Russia worse off in the long run. That's true according to their idea of rationality, but from Putin's idea that he's said in multiple television addresses, written documents, basically what he's been talking about for the last few years is that the choice of Ukraine is fundamentally not Ukraine's, and that his vision of Russian security is far more expansive than what Ukraine is able to do. And by that definition of rationality, or from those political or national interests, what we can see is that Putin is doing exactly what he said he would do, which is prevent Ukraine, either by persuasion or by force, from trying to leave Russia's orbit.
Yuval, are these sanctions that the U.S. and its Western allies are imposing going to really change anything? And I don't know, it just feels like Putin is once again going to get away with it.
So, in a certain sense, we are nowhere close to the end of this conflict. The fighting has gone on for a bit less than a day now, but there hasn't been the total capitulation of the Ukrainian military. So the fighting is still going on. In terms of the sanctions, in the medium to long term, these will inhibit Russia's ability to advance as a modern economy. Because what is being sanctioned right now is basically not just the entirety of the Russian banking sector, but basically every big business in Russia, as well as many different sectors. There's not going to be an ability for Russia to grow in any substantive way over the next couple of years and beyond. Sanctions, as we know, are fairly sticky. Unless Russia really changes the way that it does business, it's not going to be able to do much business. In the short run, it's unclear whether the sanctions as of today, as of the last hour or so, are going to be enough to change Putin's calculus, because he is committed to the victory of Russian forces over Ukraine to the extent that Ukraine is the one that has to surrender. So unless we see the Russian sanctions go to new levels, and President Biden today and Ursula von der Leyen, who is the head of the European Union, they have said very clear things that the sanctions will continue, the sanctions will get worse. They're basically at this point everything short of cutting Russia off from SWIFT and from sanctioning oil and gas exports. And that's really in order to permit for stabilization of the energy markets in Europe and in the United States. Once there is things such as opening up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve here in the US, topping up supplies in Europe, and basically the West mitigates the harm that may come from sanctioning these oil and gas exports, those are going to be the things that go next. And when that happens, those are going to be the really big sources of income that will not be going to Russia further. Nord Stream 2, that's about the future. It's now an $11 billion paperweight in the Baltic Sea. But if oil and gas sanctions do come into effect, that means Russia basically doesn't get new money. And if it doesn't get new money, the $650 billion reserve fund that they have basically set aside in order to make sure that really important members of Putin's political elite, such as the oligarchs who came to the Kremlin today in order to be told nothing is going to happen to them, if they get to that point, that money will start to go more quickly rather than less quickly. And if the burn rate of that cash gets to a level, all those people in that room or all the different sectors, all the different companies will think to themselves, I'm here to be loyal to Putin. I love Putin. He's a great guy. Foreign policy, I'm not going to get involved in that. But am I concerned about the next guy and the guy over? Are they going to essentially be as loyal as I am?
Okay.
And that sort of confusion and lack of coordination in the elite, that could certainly be the next level of sanctions.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. I know you've been up since 3 o'clock in the morning, so we really appreciate you adding some context and perspective. Yuval Weber.